Welcome to Inside the Locker Room. I'm Gabe Farias.
And I'm Johnny Walker.
And this week we are going to be continuing the conversation on the NFL Combine, specifically the oddities of the NFL Combine. We're going to lighten things up in our second segment. We're going to be talking about what is and is not a sport. Johnny?
And finally, we'll be closing it out. The NCAA has spoken. Are there going to be any changes for student athletes in the future? All that and more in Inside the Locker Room.
And welcome back to Inside the Locker Room. Gabe Farias and Johnny Walker.
Yes,
Johnny, last week we started the conversation on the NFL Combine. Something that you had an opportunity to go through back in the day. Again, I'm not going to date you. I'm not going to say when it was, but it was late 80s. Back in the day. And you brought up some interesting points on some of what I call the oddities of the NFL Combine. Specifically, this week, involving Darian Geis, the LSU standout running back. They asked him some weird questions during the Combine.
Yeah, they really did. And this is something that I kind of briefly touched on.
Sure.
Asking questions that really had absolutely nothing to do with football.
Yeah.
In the case of Darius Geis, who is a big-time running back for LSU, looking to go in the first or second round. That's how well he's done in his college career. One of the questions they asked him was, did he like men? You know, he went into one room, they asked him, did he like men? The next question he asked, when he went into another room, they asked him about his mother and her selling herself and making innuendos about that. And it really did upset the young man. And quite frankly, there's absolutely no place for that. And the NFL needs to do something about that. They need to address that. There have been other players who've made comments and said things about that. These are questions that are just completely unacceptable. There's no reason to have that. You hate that the young man had to go through that. But again, those are some of the things that the NFL definitely is going to have to correct and do something about that.
And it's interesting, and I say let's look at it from a competitive standpoint, because Darius Geis is a for real running back.
Yes.
You look at running backs historically that have come out of the SEC, and these dudes are players, man. If you come from LSU, or you come from Alabama, Auburn, these guys go immediately into the NFL, and they are week one ready. I just find it a little odd that these types of questions come up for not just those guys. If you think about that, you're asking what should be a surefire guy who's going to go into the NFL and start playing immediately for somebody. What's to say they're not going to ask even more ridiculous questions to the kids coming from Sacramento State, or the kids coming from Fresno State, or some of the other smaller schools? It just kind of adds kind of an odd twist to what the NFL Combine should be, in my mind, which is how fast are you? How high can you jump? Are you a smart kid? Are you someone that's going to come into the NFL and be ready right now? Those are ridiculous questions to ask a student athlete.
Well, again, there's a whole lot of other things that are involved too. I know that we always talk, we call this show Inside the Locker Room. Well, I'm going to take you inside the Combine. And one of the things that I didn't like right off the bat was when you go in, you're basically been picked and probed, and literally you have a man who's telling you lift your right arm, lift your left arm, lift your leg, bend over. I mean, it was embarrassing, humiliating. And then from that stage, that's when you go over to the questions. And you can see where these individual questions come up and what happens during that time. Nobody's monitoring. It's you and that particular team or someone representing that team. And you see some of the questions that are asked. And again, I am appalled at what has gone on. It was going on back when I went through the Combine. It continues to go on now, and there hasn't been anything done. And hopefully, by addressing the issue, talking about what's being said and what's happening, the NFL is going to do something to correct that.
Do you think, though, that these questions are being asked because of guys like Ryan Leaf, who just on paper and had all the tools? I mean, there was an argument to be made. He was a better pure quarterback than Peyton Manning was. Manning goes 1, Leaf goes 2. Leaf had and is arguably the biggest bust, I think, in the history of the NFL draft. But you come to find out after the fact, home dude had some mental issues that he was dealing with. Do you think now that the NFL is being more meticulous because of cases like Ryan Leaf? Now do you say, oh, that's why Johnny Manziel, who was probably the most talented quarterback in that draft, dropped from what could have been number 1, number 2, number 3, all the way down to when he was drafted by the Browns in the mid to late first round. Do you think those are reasons teams are being a little more cautious on what's between the ears more so than how high a guy can jump?
Gabe, I'm going to say this. There is no way that you're going to be able to identify how a player is and what he's like by asking him questions like that.
Okay.
Asking him a question about whether he likes guys or not, asking him a question about his mother selling herself, that has absolutely nothing to do with playing football, and you're not going to be able to make any judgment about his character by that. Again, a lot of this is on the field and what's happened off the field, but when you start getting personal like that, I think that's that's just going too far. There's just absolutely no need for that, and that needs to be corrected. They need whatever teams that are doing that, whatever individuals are asking those types of questions, they need to be punished. They need to take care of that, and that's something that needs to be done.
Do you think that they're asking the questions? Because the question for me that bothers me more than any of the questions you talked about, obviously, you don't want to talk about anybody's mother or anybody that's way. But to me, asking a young man whether he likes men or whether he likes women, what does it have to do with taking a handoff and going between the tackles on a dive? Do you think that those questions are asked more for, I mean, no pun intended, what's actually inside the locker room with the other guys and maybe what their uncomfortableness could be perceived to be in a situation like that?
Well, even if you were, Gabe, you're not going to answer the question yes. Look what's going to happen if you did say that. I mean, it's going to be on the front page of all the newspapers and all the media.
Sure.
So just don't put an individual in that situation. That's really none of your business. That's a personal question, and that has absolutely nothing to do with how I play the game of football. And if you need to find that type of answer, then maybe I'm not the guy that needs to be on your football team, and I need to move on to somebody else.
So what are some of the solutions to something like this? Because obviously this is a long-term systemic problem that is taking place during this particular NFL Combine. What are some things? Does the commissioner need to step in and say, okay, man, enough is enough? Because they've been very clear on making threats to different municipalities in different states to say, if you pass these ridiculous bathroom bills and these bills that are against the freedoms for the LGBT community, we're not going to come and we're not going to bring Super Bowls or we're not going to do things to help your state. Kind of hypocritical if you take that stance, but then you're asking young men, are you gay or are you not? What are some fixes that can take place?
Well, one of the things that they can do is when they find out exactly what team and what individual, they can suspend that individual. They can take away draft picks for some of these particular teams. So that's the step in the right direction. That's definitely something that they can do to try to stop this from happening. Will that stop it completely? No, it won't, but it's a step in the right direction.
I think we're going to continue this conversation, maybe not necessarily next segment, but this is something that's definitely worth continuing the talk on.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back on Inside the Locker Room, lighting things up again, Johnny and I, we're going to talk about what is and isn't a sport. Is rowing a sport?
Curling.
Not that kind of curling, man. That kind of curling. All that coming up next on Inside the Locker Room.
One in 6 seniors faces the threat of hunger, and millions more live in isolation.
America, let's do lunch.
Drop off a hot meal and say a quick hello. Volunteer for Meals on Wheels by donating your lunch break at americaletsdolunch.org.
And welcome back to Inside the Locker Room. Gabe Farias and Johnny Walker. Johnny, we're lighting things up a little bit.
Yes.
We're lighting things up a little bit. I'm going to ask you, and you and I are going to philosophically trade barbs on what we consider to be a sport or what isn't a sport. I said rowing as I close the segment. I think you and I can both agree that rowing is a sport.
I would say
physical activity.
Yeah,
you're in a boat here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
Rowing, oaring. Yeah, I would be a sport.
Is it oaring or rowing?
Rowing. It's rowing.
You said oaring though. Why?
I did because I was thinking oars when you said.
Okay.
But no, it's rowing. Yeah,
okay, yes,
right. It's rowing.
It is rowing.
It is a sport.
First sport. United States gold medal winners in the sport of curling. And for those of you that don't know what curling is, curling is shuffleboard on ice. It's the dude that kind of slides the disc, and then you got the. I guess that's the best way to make it sound. It's a broom. They clear the path for the ice to land in cylinders and they get points. Zero athletic ability whatsoever. I mean, you and I could be curlers without working out a bit. Like our working out is, I don't know, making sure that we're well fed. You know, is curling? Would you consider curling to be a sport? And mind you, we're going to make a whole lot of people mad.
I will say this. The first question I would ask,
Sure.
before I even got into whether it's a sport or not, is how in the world they came up with that. I mean, were two people just sitting around with nothing to do? And they had a broom in their hand, and they say, hey, why don't we push something? And it's just, sweep and like stop it in a certain area. So that would be the first question I ask. Now, is it a sport? No, I would not consider it a sport at all. I wouldn't say that. But I will say I am happy that the two individuals that represent the United States and they got the gold medal. I think that's great. It was three.
It's two sweepers.
The two sweepers and the person that tells them left or right or
pardon myself to the American Curling Federation or whatever it is that sanctions your sport. I don't know if it's 2 or 3 or 4, or if they have a pit crew like a racing. Do they go over and do the broomers? Like, do they get a squeege of water? I don't know. I think I agree that curling is probably not a sport.
No, I wouldn't give it a sport. I wouldn't give it that status.
All right, there you go. We agree on that one. The second one, billiards.
Billiards.
Pool.
Okay.
For the lay person, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Would that be a sport? Man, it's hard to. I would say that considering some of the shots that I've seen people make, and
you better not say that's a sport.
No, I would have to say that there are some techniques that you have to use, and some of the ways that the angles and things. I might put that into a category of sport.
I think it's more geometry. You qualify for a math minor if you're able to do it because of the angles.
But you got to hold the stick in the right direction and got to angle it the right way. So
the stick is a cue.
Is a cue.
Okay.
I might give that. I might give that a sport. Maybe. I mean, it's depending on what day it was.
I'm gonna say no.
You gonna say no?
I'm just saying, man.
All right.
I just, anybody who's, Willie the Saskatchewan Nightmare Johnson, I don't know. I just don't think it's a sport. I love playing it when I'm inebriated.
Yes.
Man, I'm at 8 ball corner pocket. Yeah, I mean, it's fun.
Right. I agree.
I just don't think it's a sport. Okay, so that's a maybe and a no.
Yeah.
How about snowboarding?
Snowboarding. Yes, definitely a sport.
Yeah, you know what?
Question.
I don't know why I wrote that down. It is kind of that takes athletic ability. I mean, there's Shaun White, who's made it really famous.
Oh man, that's awesome.
And globalized snowboarding.
Yeah, I think that what I've seen and what these young athletes are doing in snowboarding is just incredible. I mean, they've taken it to a whole nother level, and to be able to watch that as a sport, it actually brought interest to Winter Olympics, because I'm not a big fan of Winter Olympics. So I definitely do enjoy the snowboarding.
Didn't watch a second of it this year.
You didn't watch a second?
I didn't watch
the snowboarding was awesome.
Second of Winter Olympics.
That and the ski jump, I like that one too.
My favorite is the luge. Even though I didn't watch it, I mean, you got to be crazy to get on the luge. Luge is like literally laying on your back, unprotected,
with your fingers
on a sled, going about 100 miles an hour.
Right, I agree. Yeah. That would be a sport. Definitely call that a sport.
The luge is definitely a sport.
I'd definitely be a sport.
Okay, so yes to snowboarding, yes to snowboarding.
Yes.
Okay. This is one I think you and I need to talk about, professional wrestling. But I'm not talking about Olympic wrestling. That is definitely a sport. I'm talking about Hulk Hogan off the top ropes. There he goes. I think it's a sport.
Do you?
I think if you take away... See, here's the thing. There's no competitiveness because obviously
you know who's winning.
You know who's winning. But tell me that those guys aren't some of the greatest athletes you've ever seen with some of the things that they do.
I will say that they are some of the greatest entertainers.
No!
I will give them that. They are great entertainers, and I have to put them in that category, Gabe. And the reason why I have to say they're some of the greatest entertainers is because you already know who's going to win, who's going to lose.
Take the competitiveness
but that's what sports is about, competitiveness. If there's no competition, you're not competing, I can't give it a sport. I can't give it a check. I can't do it. Okay. There's no way. Great entertainment, though.
You could snowboard.
No,
if you learn how to do it, you're athletic enough. You could. Well, you could curl.
Yeah, okay.
You could billiard. Billiard? You could billiard.
Yeah.
You could play pool.
Right.
Could you do some of the things that The Rock does, that the big, some of the things that athletic? Can you really?
Yes. How, man? I'd love to do that.
So you can jump off the top rope off a huge ladder and go through like
And
8
just jump
tables.
down. Yeah, I could do that. But you know the part that I would do the best though is all the talk and all the jive going on between.
You would be a good talker.
Yeah, you know. Now that part I would enjoy. That's the entertainment part. That's like talking trash in a football.
We're going to disagree.
No.
Agree to disagree on this. I
It's
think that
entertainment.
because of the athletic
It's
nature
entertainment.
and the fact that my
What would be-
stupid self pays
What
$69.95.
would be your wrestling name? What would you be?
Oh, wow.
What would be your wrestling name? Would it be Gordito again?
Gord, Ito. It's 2
Gordito?
names,
Okay.
man.
Gordito? Okay.
El
And you have
Machito.
also a long orange.
El Machito.
El Machito.
El Machito. I don't know what the word means, but it just sounds cool. And I'd wear a mask. I would go.
Yeah, you'd have the mask.
I would go total lucha libre, man. I would with the cape.
With some orange tights on or
Yes,
something? Oh,
yes.
man, I can see that.
Okay. Last one.
There you go.
The wonderful sport of poker.
I don't even know why that's considered a sport.
It's on ESPN.
That's ridiculous.
They make lots of
I
millions of
have
dollars.
never been able to understand how you could call poker a sport. There is absolutely no athletic. If you can't put a card down, are you? I don't know what. There's no reason for it to be considered a sport. I have never been able to understand that.
It
whatsoever.
challenges the mind, my
yeah,
friend.
right. You know, come on. It's not a sport. I would never put it in that category.
So you think billiards is more of a sport than poker?
I do because I think you got to actually do something.
See, and
you got to actually, make something happen.
This is the counter to my argument, and unfortunately, I'm going to have the last say because we're running out of time. I think on the wrestling side, you have to be tremendously athletic.
I agree.
Which is why, but that takes a competition out. Poker has a competition, but I mean, Fat Johnny, who weighs 614 pounds, is the world champion. I don't know if that's true
It means
or factual,
absolutely
but
not. Yeah. There's no athletic ability in poker whatsoever.
we're going to agree on that one. I don't think poker's a sport.
Maybe dominoes. Dominoes,
Really?
You gotta slam it
Dominoes.
down. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Really?
Yeah, now that I can call that a sport. I can watch that on ESPN.
I think you're crazy. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to be wrapping up Inside the Locker Room coming up next.
Nothing to do this week? Don't miss another event. Go to blacksinsanantonio.com for our event calendar. The home of the largest business directory in San Antonio with an African American focus. Sign up today for our weekly e-blast and text message alerts. Help us make this a better community. Connect, empower, grow.
Planning the right amount of food is hard. The Guestimator makes it easy. Just tell it who's coming and what's for dinner. Then it tells you how much to make. And yes, it even plans for leftovers. Try it at savethefood.com.
And welcome back to Inside the Locker Room. Gabe Funny-Ass, Johnny Walker. Johnny, the last couple of weeks we've been talking about this massive, massive topic, the NCAA college basketball FBI probe, busting coaches, busting student athletes for taking money. But we're finally starting to see some movement on some potential solutions. You've got some of that information with you.
Well, the first thing we find out is the 2017 fiscal year, the NCAA made $1.1 billion. So
Billion
that's what
with
they
a B.
reported. With the B.
Yes.
Yeah, with the big B. We know that.
Big nonprofit.
From that,
Yeah.
there's a $105 million surplus. Which means that after all the expenses, after everything's paid, they have a $105 million surplus. So that's just sitting there. They just set that aside. Now, after all of this, Mark Emmert finally speaks, and he tells us that he is interested.
Mark Emmert,
who is the president of the NCAA,
Of the NCAA, yes.
says that he is interested in using the Olympic model, which we're talking about that trust, where he feels that there will be an opportunity for college athletes to get paid through endorsements, and then they will be able to put that money in a trust fund. So he is definitely talking about that. That looks like something that they're going to move forward. He was very adamant about the fact that he doesn't believe that the conferences are interested in paying athletes, that he doesn't think that that's going to happen, but he is willing to budge on the Olympic Trust and letting student athletes get paid for endorsements.
Wow, imagine that. The schools and the conferences not wanting
big
to
move.
pay the athletes. Imagine that.
That's not,
huh?
we're definitely.
I'm shocked at that. But I am interested, though, and I keep referring to a kid like Johnny Manziel, who made millions and millions and millions of dollars. And there's an argument to be made that new beautiful addition to the stadium is because of what Johnny football meant to that university. If Snickers wants to, while he's in school, invest in him as somebody who's endorsing their product, what you're saying is, you can do that. We'll take that $500,000, $1 million. You can't take it now. We're going to put it in a trust. But you will be able to earn money based off of your likeness. That's what you're saying.
Right, okay. Name and likeness. Yes, they're finally willing to give into that. So now, one of the things that when we've been talking about agencies and we've been talking about what we're going to use to try to monitor what's going on in college basketball, we do now know that we do have the Commission to Reform College Basketball, which is a very interesting title. Commission to Reform College Basketball, who is looking into a lot of the different scenarios.
Now, is that a new commission, or is that something that's just been active recently?
It's something that's just been active recently.
Okay.
So we know that they're looking into some of the things that they're going to do as far as changing the dynamics, what we've seen going on in college basketball, again, addressing some of the endorsement issues and how student athletes may or may not get paid. But at least we know that there is an agency there that's aside from the NCAA that's looking into what's going on with college basketball as we speak.
And you may not know the answer to this, but that particular agency, is that an agency that's a byproduct of the NCAA? Is this something that the CEO or the president and their board said, we need to start an agency to provide oversight? Or is this something that the government has enacted to provide that oversight? If you don't know the answer, which direction do you think there needs to be government oversight?
It isn't a government oversight. It's not a government entity. Basically, it was developed so that you can take the onus off the NCAA. So they're tired of getting sued, and like I told you before, they've got several lawsuits that are still pending as we speak. So it's basically a commission that they put together.
And when you say they, who's they? Who put
they? Just different groups that have come together, and they want to get more involved in what's going on with college basketball in this particular case. So NCAA basically doesn't have any say-so on whether they're going to have a commission or not. They might have a representative that is a part of that commission.
So it's an autonomous group is what you're saying?
It's an autonomous group, yes. It's not attached to the NCAA at all, and it needs to be that way. And we talked about that before. We talked about how there needs to be a commission or agency for college basketball, and I will see in the near future where they'll be doing the same thing for college football. And again, those are the steps going in the right direction to try to see that we can bring about some change that are going to help out student athletes in the long run.
Do you think that this is kind of the last straw, if you will, or the last attempt to prevent college basketball, the multi-billion-dollar industry that it has turned into and under the oversight of the federal government? Because this has Senate Oversight Committee written all over it. If it gets to that point, are you saying this might definitely, or are you saying, do you think this is kind of one of those last measures to prevent that from happening?
Yes, I believe that is true, but I do believe that the government will try to find a way, and maybe they'll have a representative that's a part of that commission. I do believe that. I wouldn't say that the government is going to have complete control of that. I think they probably want to kind of steer clear of that, but I do see that they will definitely be keeping their eye on some of the things that are going on, some of the decisions that these commissions are making, and making sure that it goes along with, more importantly, antitrust laws, making sure that it goes by the law and it's not going to take away from what's going on or what we've seen currently in college sports.
Do you see this as being the beginning of the necessary steps to fix this problem?
Yes, it's definitely doing that, and that's why they came up with the commission. But again, like I said, I think it was to take a lot of the heat off the NCAA, but it goes back to what I was saying. There really isn't going to be a need for the NCAA, and I believe this is the first steps in going in the direction to try to get us away from the NCAA and the control that they've had I think we're seeing the beginning of the end of the NCAA.
You know what? I think this is a great conversation. This is something that we're going to be continuing to talk
Yes.
about. And I think it's a good idea if in the future maybe we bring in a legal representative to kind of take a look
Definitely
at some of those, somebody from the legal community,
Mm-hmm.
an attorney to come in that deals with these types of things. I think that's a great idea, and I think it's something we're probably going to be doing here in the very near future.
Definitely do that.
All
I
right.
look forward to that.
Johnny, this was fun, man. This was the fastest half hour I've ever been a part of ever.
That's it. That's it. Hey, inside the locker room.
There
That's
you
what
go.
it's supposed to be.
Good show, my man. That's going to wrap up this week's edition of Inside the Locker Room for Johnny Walker. I'm Gabe Faria saying we'll see you on the field.